The overwhelmingly vast number of atheists I talk to believe in government, not just a little bit. They are socialists. How is government a religion?
It's very clearly a belief in a superhuman entity that is imagined to have powers and rights that human beings don't have, and virtues that human beings don't have, because they'll actually say, we need government, I don't trust people, which obviously logically implies that they think government is something other than people. Because I don't say, I don't trust tigers, so I'm going to put a crown on a tiger and have it in my living room. Like, that's not going to help. It's going to eat you anyway. They really view it as something that isn't even bound by human nature, despite all of history showing, no, it actually makes human nature way worse. They actually talk as if the law is something other than threats by human beings. And you can see it in basically the gospel, the doctrine they've been taught. I have a talk called The Gospel According to Government. The terminology they use about the law, we need to have laws. Well, what is that? Like, you're talking about it's commands from on high, from some spiritual, like, because you wouldn't call it that if somebody said, give me your money so I can build a school. That's just a threat. So all of the terminology reflects the fact that it's a religious faith. It's totally a faith-based belief. And I think my favorite video that I've ever done, I didn't do. It's called The Most Dangerous Religion, where somebody took a bunch of clips from different talks I did and made a video to go along with it. And I said, well, I wish I gave that as one talk, because that's the most succinct talk I've ever given. And I didn't, because they took bits and pieces from a bunch of different things. But it goes through all the ways in which the belief in government is totally a religion. It's just the one that people believe in. And government is totally a superhuman God that they believe in. But again, they believe it so well, they don't even see it as that. They just think it's really there. Like, no, there really is a God of the volcano, and he really does get mad if you don't throw human sacrifices into him every month. That's not a superstition. That's not believing in some mythical thing. That's just what is. That's how they actually view government. They really and truly believe that there's an entity with superhuman rights. And so they can't recognize that as a religion. Like, if it's not bound by human morality, has extra rights, extra powers, and extra virtues, it's not person. It's not natural. It's supernatural. It's a deity.
And back to inadvertently advocating voluntarism, you'll ask people, say, do you support religion? They're like, yeah, I'm a Christian. And I say, do you believe I should be forced to attend church, forced to fund Bibles, forced to fund building new churches? And they're like, oh, no. We send people door to door. If you don't like it, we leave. But when it comes to government, they're like, oh, we need schools. You don't fund schools, you should be put in a cage. And it's such a contradiction.
Right.
Quite simply, a statist is somebody who believes in having a state. Basically, anybody who wants government. Government is the exercise of authority over a people or place, and that is basically the right to rule. It's not just the ability to control other people, because most people have that in one way or another. It's the right. It's the idea that certain people, it's legitimate for them to forcibly control others. Belief in government is a purely faith-based, indoctrinated belief. It doesn't actually make any sense in practical terms or in evidence or in logic. For years, I thought it was a really good analogy to compare government to religion, and only a few years ago did I realize it's not an analogy. It is a religion in every way. It has a superhuman deity, government, that has rights that mortals don't. It isn't restricted by the rules that apply to mortals. It issues commands, and if you disobey, you're a sinner and you deserve to be punished. The faithful, the true believers, they have great faith in these bizarre rituals, elections and legislation and appointments, and they dress up and then they say, ta-da, now I represent government. I know I just look like a person, but I don't just have the rights of a person because I represent the magical deity called government. And so I'm allowed to demand your money and boss you around and hurt you if you disobey me. I'm acting on behalf of government, and it has commandments called laws. And these laws aren't just the threats of humans. They are decrees from something superhuman. And so all you good people out there should bow to this deity. And if you want the world fixed, this is what you pray to. And we give you certain rituals of how to pray to it and when you're supposed to pray to it. And pray to the God to make the world what you wish it was and to save you from all the uncertainties of reality. The doctrine people are taught is just patently absurd. And a bunch of examples of that are like consent of the governed. There isn't such thing. If it's consent, it's voluntary. If it's being governed, it's not. The actual given excuse is, we have the right to rule you because you decided we did, even if you didn't vote for us, and even if you oppose everything we do to you. And, well, they represent us. Okay, they represent us by doing a lot of things that we don't have the right to do. And they represent us by bossing us around and taking our money. Like, I bet if I went to my neighbor and bossed him around and took his money and said, I'm representing you, he would say, what? What a stupid thing to say. To me, the most insane is, we are the government, which you hear everywhere. And I ask somebody, wait, do you really not notice that there's a group of people over there, they issue threats, and they call them laws, and they issue demands for money, and they call it taxes, and if you disobey, they send men with guns to hurt you. Now, are you really incapable of distinguishing between yourself and them? One of the biggest giveaways that the belief in government is a complete blind faith religious belief is the way people respond. One very easy line of questioning is, can you give somebody else a right that you don't have? And everybody says, well, no, of course not. Well, how about you and your buddy? Can the two of you give someone else a right that neither of you had? Well, no. And it only takes a couple more questions to get to, well, how did Congress get rights that you don't have? They get emotional and they get angry or they get defensive or they run away. They didn't come to this belief through reasoning and evidence and logic. They came there by having a blind faith belief smashed into their heads starting before they could even talk. It's just something they were taught to believe, that there's this thing called authority and that it's allowed to do things that human beings aren't and that people have an obligation to obey it, to the point where, yeah, it's some people, they weren't gods or anything, some people wrote down a thing on paper and then they called it legislation and they did certain rituals and then people go around saying, well, this is law. Most people literally feel physical discomfort and fear at the thought of disobeying anyone in authority. Most people can't say, no, I'm not going to do that, because it goes against their years and years of programming and indoctrination that trains them to think, if you do as you're told, you're good. If you don't, you're bad. And that's the message of school, and that message gets pounded in people's heads. Students are taught over and over and over and over again, every stinking day they're in school, that the measure of your virtue is how well you obey authority. The whole approval-disapproval thing. The one thing you learn in school is, if you do as you're told, you get approval and reward. And if you don't do as you're told, you get disdain and condemnation. They'll make sure everybody knows you're a bad person because you didn't do as you were told. The belief in authority leads everybody, good people, bad people, everything in between, to advocate and do things they wouldn't otherwise do, bad things they wouldn't otherwise do, including cops, because the cops really and truly believe that they have the right to do things that I don't have the right to do and you don't have the right to do. The only reason most of them do what they do is because they believe in authority and they really believe that legislation gives them an exemption from morality. So that when they do something and someone says, hey, what you're doing is bad, hey, I don't make the law, I just enforce it. I'm not responsible for my actions, I'm just a tool of some weird thing somewhere else called government. You can't blame me for what I am personally doing because I'm not really doing it. As loony as that is, that's what most of them will say whenever somebody says, hey, what you're doing is wrong. It's not okay to, it's not okay to lock people up for smoking marijuana. It's not okay, all the ways in which quote-unquote law enforcement initiates violence against nonviolent people. And if you bring that up to them, they literally talk as if they didn't do it. The only reason they do that is because they were taught the lie of authority and government and law along with everyone else, and then they were told, you're just a tool of the thing called law, and that makes it so you have rights that other people don't have. So you don't have to feel bad about physically assaulting nonviolent people because the law says it's okay. It really is just permission to ignore your conscience by saying you have rights that other people don't. You know, you don't have the right to tell other people what habit to have on your own. You don't have the right to go and extort people on your own. But once you are law enforcement, then not only is it okay, it's noble and great to go around robbing people and bossing them around. That is the biggest danger of the belief in authority. It tricks good people into condoning or doing really nasty, horrible, violent things because they think, well, this is okay if government and authority does it.
They are raised by their parents, by the school, by the government, by the culture, by all the authoritarian messages built into everything to think that obedience is a virtue. And when you raise the culture to think that, and you get one nasty psycho at the top who says, hey, go do bad stuff, people say, well, I have to follow orders. I have to obey the law. I have to do as I'm told because that's a virtue. And then good people march off and do evil stuff. I'm not scared of the Maos and the Stalins and the Hitlers. I'm scared of the thousands or millions of people that hallucinate them to be authority and so do their bidding and pay for their empires and carry out their orders. I don't care if there's one loony with a stupid mustache. He's not a threat if the people do not believe in authority. Some people assume that, well, you must trust everybody if you don't want government. That's not at all true. I don't nearly trust everybody, but if I don't trust people to run their own lives, why on earth would I trust them to be in a position of power where they can forcibly run other people's lives?
Really what it boils down to is saying, I don't trust people. People are untrustworthy and unpredictable. So my solution is to take some of those people, some of the most untrustworthy around, give them permission to violently control us all, and that will protect us from the untrustworthiness of mankind. Okay, you're so scared of the average man out there and so thankful for government. Let me ask you, who has taken more of your money under threat of force? Private people threatening you or agents of authority threatening you? How many murders are committed by private people compared to how many are committed by people acting on behalf of authority? It's not even close. The number of murders committed in the name of law enforcement and government and authority completely dwarfs private murder. Even governments killing the people of other countries is small compared to them killing their own people. In the last 100 years, over 270 million human beings killed by their own governments, not counting war. That first step is always the hardest, to get someone to dare to set aside his blind faith long enough to think about things, to back up enough to say, maybe government isn't even legitimate at all. It takes a lot for people indoctrinated into the faith to dare to think of those literally blasphemous ideas that, no, those people in Washington don't have the right to rule. Their threats aren't laws, they're just threats. Their demands aren't taxes, it's just extortion. And that really feels like heresy, because it is. It is heresy against the God called government. I now have a huge amount of hope, because I see an acceleration of the number of people who dare to think about these things, and now the number of people able to have this conversation is just hugely exploding. And they're still a minority. But that exponential curve, I don't think it's stopping. I really think the cult of statism is as good as dead. Ultimately, I think the belief in government is doomed for the exact same reasons that the belief in a flat earth was doomed. There's too many people pointing out the utter inherent insanity in the belief, and that's just not going to go away. Nobody who understands self-ownership and understands why authority is inherently bogus wakes up the next day and say, suddenly, I think I should do whatever the politicians say. I think really humanity is just beginning to wake up to what it's supposed to be. Humanity wasn't meant to be a domesticated species owned by a ruling class. Every human being owns himself, is in charge of his own life. I'd like to see actual rational moral civilization in my lifetime, but we are going to get there. Sooner or later, we are totally going to get there. The lie will never outlive the truth forever.
We read now from the Gospel according to government, first book of Politicians, chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning there was chaos and mayhem, and people were as wild beasts, and there was great wailing and gnashing of teeth throughout the land. Then it came to pass that politicians came down out of heaven, shining in glory, and spoke unto the people, saying, We are the Lord thy government, and we have decided to bless you with our presence, so that we may save you from your sins. Obey our commandments, pay tribute unto us, and salvation shall be yours. For without us, you are but stupid, violent animals, and only through our benevolent domination of you shall ye be transformed into a civilized and prosperous people. And the people wondered at the words of the politicians and were sorely afraid. But the politicians said unto them, Fear not. If you will only blindly obey the God-called government and mindlessly comply with our every whim, then you shall be blessed. But any who disobey our commands, the heathens and criminals who think for themselves, being evil in our sight, shall be cast into prison and banished from the collectivist authoritarian paradise we shall create. So cast aside your individual judgment, your free will, your conscience, and your moral codes, and follow us, the high priests of government, without thought or question. The foolish man builds his house upon consensus, cooperation, and voluntary interaction. But the wise man builds his house upon political promises, state coercion, and the lust for power. Free will, self-determination, and peaceful coexistence are the devil's work and lead only to fire and brimstone, suffering and torment. But blind obedience, unthinking loyalty, and unwavering subservience are the path to salvation. You have heard that it hath been said, Love your neighbor and do unto others as you would have done unto you. But we, the politicians, say unto you, Pray for the incarceration or extermination of those who are not like you. But pray also for your neighbors to be taxed and regulated. Pray for your friends to be controlled and enslaved. Devote your heart and soul to the rituals of politics, so that we, the high priests of government, may dominate all of mankind for its own good. Only then shall you have everlasting peace. We are the Lord thy government, and here are our commandments. Thou shalt have no other gods before government. Thou shalt follow no moral codes and no value systems above the arbitrary whims of the politicians. Thou shalt not take the name of government in vain or speak against us, the high priests of state. For those who do are sinners, criminals, and terrorists in our eyes, and shall be wiped from the face of the earth. Remember election day to keep it holy. Judge not the politicians or their mercenaries, lest ye be put on the no-fly list. Honor thy congressman and thy senator, that their reign may be long upon the land which the Lord thy government has taken from thee. Thou shalt murder by voting for those who engage in perpetual warmongering. Thou shalt kill whenever government commands it. And the killing shall be called national defense, serving one's country and spreading democracy. No greater love hath a man than this, that a man will go halfway around the world to murder complete strangers because we told him to. Thou shalt steal by voting for your neighbors to be taxed, and thou shalt hate and persecute any who resist. Thou shalt covet thy neighbor's income, and his car, and his house, and everything that is thy neighbor's. Thou shalt beg the Lord thy government to take these things from thy neighbor, and give them unto thee. Verily we say unto you, it is greedy and selfish to keep what you have earned, but noble and virtuous to ask us to forcibly take what your neighbor has earned. Thou shalt bear false witness by calling thieves and robbers public servants, by calling usurpers and tyrants leaders and representatives, and by calling those who advocate liberty for all criminals and terrorists. Blessed are the blindly obedient, for the politicians shall reward them. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst after power, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the voters, for they shall legitimize tyranny and oppression. Blessed are the bankers, for they shall embezzle the earth. Blessed are the jackbooted thugs, for they shall get away with murder. Blessed are the corrupt in heart, for they shall receive power. Blessed are the warmongers, for they shall imagine themselves to be gods. Blessed are they who have persecuted the innocent for the politicians' sake, for they shall be promoted. And cursed are the heathens and extremists who speak out against our tyranny, who encourage you to question authority, and who instruct you to disobey immoral commands. We, the politicians, say unto you, worship those who insult and exploit you, bow to those who extort and oppress you, and vote for those who despitefully use you and persecute you. Here ends our reading from the first book of Politicians, from the Gospel according to Government. I'm very happy to be able to preach to this congregation because I sense that many of you need help, because I believe you are losing faith in the God called government. Now, at times, our wise and benevolent political masters, they test our faith to make sure we are true believers by doing things which to us may seem insane and immoral. But it is not our place to question. If we are good and pure, we will gladly pay and obey. If we don't like the wars, if we think there's something wrong with them taking our money and giving it to giant banks, or running Ponzi schemes, or fabricating crime, it is a testament to our faith that we will blindly, unthinkingly go along with this oppression to show our loyalty to the state. It is a sin to question the wisdom of our betters, the politicians. I think God has something to say about this. Thanks. The righteous among us will tolerate every indignity and humiliation and insult to show our faith in the state. And only heretics would ever suggest that the politicians that are in Washington are not our rightful lords and masters. Do not listen to such blasphemy. In fact, report it to the authorities whenever you hear it. Ask not what you can do to improve society. Ask how you can empower and enrich the parasitic ruling class so that they can create a totalitarian utopia for all of us. I hope these words will be of value to you, and I hope you will apply these lessons to your life. So the next time a cop or a tax collector or a bureaucrat decide to butt into your life or boss you around or rob you or assault you or tase you, I hope you can find the strength to pathetically grovel and submit without question and blindly obey their every whim and cooperate with whatever injustice and hardship they wish to inflict upon you or anyone else, because that is the mark of a virtuous, noble citizen, and that is the path to salvation. Look how well it worked for the Russians and the Germans and the Chinese and the subjects of every other tyrannical regime in history. May we too find peace through warmongering, freedom through subservience, justice through violent aggression, and prosperity through universal enslavement. Here end our lessons. Blessed are those who blindly follow orders and do not think for themselves. Amen. Okay, I'm back. I regained my sanity. Now, what's really sad is what I just delivered is basically the message that we all got, with a few exceptions. We all got from our teachers, from our parents, from the media, and from the government. Now, it wasn't quite that direct or honest, but that is the underlying message, that obedience to the state is a virtue. What's even more sad is government is the religion that people really believe in. Of all the people who label themselves Christian, Jewish, Muslim, atheist, agnostic, whatever, the real religion of the vast majority of people in this country and the world is the worship of government. It's the God they bow to, it's the God they pray for blessings, and it's the God they obey. Where they go on Sunday morning is just window dressing. I want to give a few closing words as this Porkfest winds down. To me, the beauty of Porkfest is not that we're all the same, because we're not. It's not that we all care about the same things, because we don't. It's not that we all agree on everything, because we don't. We just have one thing in common, and that's that we believe in freedom. You know, the media and people out there, they like to talk about diversity. I've never seen any crowd anywhere with the diversity of Porkfest. We have rich and poor and everything in between, and Christians, Jews, Muslims, atheists, agnostics, some religions I haven't even heard of before. Men and women, old and young, all sorts of races. We have gun toters and pacifists, gay and straight, a whole bunch of different personalities, different interests, different priorities, different beliefs. And we do disagree on a lot of things, which is why we like to stand around discussing, even arguing. But we get along. What you don't see here is you don't see us robbing each other. You don't see us assaulting each other or attacking each other or threatening each other. You also don't see cops. Now, you may see a couple and not know it, because apparently they think peaceful coexistence is such a horrible thing that they need to infiltrate it. Other than that, you don't see cops or authority or government, but we get along. So the last thing I want to say is a message not to the people here, but to everyone else on the planet, the rest of the world, knowing that hopefully this will make it to YouTube. Everyone else, you say you want world peace. You say you want freedom and justice and equality and security. You say you want peaceful coexistence. Well, guess what? We have all of that right here at Porkfest. So to the rest of the world, you say you want all those things, and I want you to have all those things. I want the whole world to be Porkfest. And it doesn't mean we all agree. It doesn't mean we see eye to eye on everything. We don't. We already don't, and we never will. That's just fine. We get along. To the rest of the world, if you really want those things, if you really want world peace, justice, freedom, you can have it. But I'll tell you the price. I'll tell you what it's going to cost you if you really want that. Give up the cult of statism and embrace humanity. Thank you.